Hi, my name is Isabella. And if you've ever had your heart stolen by someone you trusted, only for them to flaunt their betrayal, then maybe you'll understand this. My cousin didn't just steal my fiancé. She got engaged to him right after our breakup, then had the audacity to invite me to their wedding, claiming it was for family peace. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was realizing my entire family knew. And they hid it from me, even as she paraded her new life with Leo in front of everyone. While I stood by, watching their blissful charade, they called me bitter for not letting it go. But when she pushed her luck one last time and an unexpected encounter revealed the truth, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I let the universe deliver a truth more devastating than anything I could have ever imagined. And now, let's just say, her perfectly curated life came crashing down. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special. For you! It was a Tuesday evening, almost 8 p.m. when I saw the package. It wasn't on my porch, nor was it delivered by a mail carrier. It was just there, sitting on my kitchen counter, placed conspicuously by my younger sister, Sophia, who had left it when she visited earlier. A small, plain brown box, taped shut with the kind of hurried carelessness that suggests the sender didn't truly care about its contents. I wasn't expecting anything, but a knot formed in my stomach. Inside, nestled amongst crumpled tissue paper, was a framed photograph. It was a picture of me, Leo, and my cousin, Olivia, from a picnic we had, just a few months before everything fell apart. We were all laughing, arms around each other, a picture of perfect family harmony. There was no card, no return address, just that photo. I stood there, holding the frame, my thumbs tracing the outline of Leo's smile, a smile that was once exclusively mine. The glass was cracked along one side, and Olivia's face, in particular, seemed to gleam with a subtle, almost imperceptible smirk. I used to believe betrayal arrived with a bang, a heated argument, a slammed door, a shattered glass. But mine came in the quiet of a photo frame, an uninvited guest in my own home, sent by the very person who had orchestrated my heartbreak. I carried the photo to the living room, setting it on the coffee table, hoping it might somehow explain itself. But it just sat there, still and smug, a silent testament to a betrayal I thought I had moved past. How utterly perfect that something so innocuous, so seemingly innocent, had circled back to me like a warning. Looking back, I genuinely thought I was being the understanding one. I believed that being the good cousin meant swallowing my feelings whole, smiling through every one of Olivia's self-inflicted dramas, even when she leaned on me too heavily, even when she flirted a little too long with Leo in front of me. I convinced myself she would never actually cross that line, that her adoration for him was merely a fleeting crush. But she did. Just 3 months ago, in a bustling new restaurant downtown, the line wasn't just crossed, it was utterly obliterated. Leo and I were celebrating our 7-year anniversary, 7 years of shared dreams, laughter, and an unspoken promise of a future together. Olivia showed up 20 minutes late, her eyes bright, her cheeks flushed with an almost manic energy. "Sorry," she giggled, sliding into the booth beside Leo, as if she hadn't just ghosted me for days. Traffic was insane. That should have been my first red flag, but I just smiled, a practiced, polite smile, and said, "No worries, we just ordered." She talked animatedly about her new art gallery opening, her upcoming trip to Europe, her incessant need for positive vibes. I nodded, feigning interest, my hand resting on Leo's arm, a silent affirmation of our bond. And then she leaned in, resting her chin on her hand, her eyes gleaming like a child about to reveal a secret. "I have some news," she said, her voice dripping with mock innocence. "Leo and I are engaged." Time didn't stop. It just slowed, like someone had deliberately dragged their hand through the film reel of my life, smudging every frame. "Oh," I managed, a hollow sound. "Wow." And then she dropped the real bomb, her voice a theatrical whisper. "We've been together for months." It just felt right. My brain struggled to translate a sentence that simply didn't make sense. Leo, my boyfriend, my future, the man I was supposed to marry in a few months. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline, for her to burst into laughter and declare it all a cruel joke. Then my gaze drifted toward my parents, who had apparently been invited to this little ambush without my knowledge. They were sitting 2 tables away, sipping champagne like it was a wedding reception. My mother lifted her glass, a strained smile plastered on her face. "It's all about the next generation now, Isabella," she said, her voice thin and reedy. That's when I knew. I was alone in that room, that restaurant, that celebratory dinner, that photo, all symbols of a story. I thought I understood, but I didn't. I was merely a footnote in someone else's triumphant headline. Back in the present, I sat on my couch, legs curled under me, the framed photo still in my hand. I hadn't cried. I hadn't screamed. I'd just gone quiet in a way that even my closest friends found unsettling. That night, after the restaurant ambush, I didn't go straight home. I sat in my car outside my apartment building for almost an hour, watching the windows glow with other people's ordinary lives. I was still in my work clothes, my badge still clipped to my blouse. I'd gone from Isabella Ramirez, senior architect, to Isabella Ramirez, discarded placeholder, in a single devastating conversation. It wasn't just about Leo. God knows he'd been drifting for months. I just hadn't wanted to see it. It was about Olivia taking and then acting like she was the one doing me a favor. I thought about the countless nights I'd covered for her at work, the times I'd lent her money when she was short, the prestigious internship referral I'd given her when she couldn't get hired anywhere else. And now here she was, planning a life with the man who once promised me a future. And my parents were smiling about it. I finally went inside, kicked off my heels, and dropped my purse. I was halfway through pouring myself a glass of water when my phone buzzed. It was an Instagram notification. Olivia had posted a photo from that night. She was smiling, her hand resting on Leo's arm, his head leaned against hers. My parents were in the background, both beaming. Caption: "So blessed. Family is everything." But what caught my breath was the ring glinting on her left hand. It was my engagement ring. The one Leo had chosen for me. The one we'd looked at together countless times. I zoomed in. The familiar diamond, the intricate setting. She wore my ring. She used me. And that was the precise moment something inside me snapped. I didn't sleep that night. After staring at Olivia's photo, her smug little smile, my ring, on her hand like a trophy, I just sat in my living room with the lights off, nursing a cup of lukewarm herbal tea and wondering when exactly my life had become a cruel parody of betrayal. Somewhere between being the family's emotional rock and their personal doormat, I had missed the moment they all stopped seeing me as a person. 2 weeks passed. No apology, not even a call. Just silence, as if I was expected to quietly digest the betrayal, rinse my mouth, and show up smiling for whatever came next. So when my mother texted about a family dinner, I knew exactly what it was. A performance. "Let's all move forward," she wrote. Move forward. I almost didn't go, but a part of me, perhaps the part still desperate for some kind of explanation, wanted to see how far they'd go, pretending nothing had happened. I chose a sleek black dress with heels higher than I was comfortable in. Not because I wanted to impress anyone, but because if I had to walk into that restaurant feeling like a ghost, at least I'd do it looking like someone who hadn't just been gutted by her own blood. The restaurant was a quaint, unassuming Italian spot on Main Street, a place we'd celebrated dozens of birthdays, mine included. The hostess recognized me, smiled wide. "Back again, Isabella," she chirped. I paused, forcing a tight smile. Olivia, who had just walked in behind me with Leo, linked her arm through his, her smile radiating. She was here last week too, but we were celebrating something private. My hand tightened on my clutch. The hostess, oblivious to the undercurrents, led us to a long table near the back. My father was already seated, sipping something dark and neat. He stood and kissed my cheek, a perfunctory gesture, as if we hadn't just avoided speaking for 14 days. Olivia sat beside him, glowing, always glowing now. I took a seat directly across from her, my gaze unwavering. My mother arrived moments later, air-kissing both of us and dropping her oversized purse into the booth as if claiming territory. Dinner started with forced laughter and too many passed the breadsticks. I tried to breathe, tried to find an opening, some escape from this suffocating charade. But every time I opened my mouth, every time I tried to say something real about Leo, the engagement, the betrayal, my father would cut in. "So, how's work, Isabella? Have you checked in on Aunt Clara? The weather's been something lately, hasn't it?" Each interruption more practiced than the last, a perfectly executed diversion. Olivia, of course, played her part with theatrical brilliance. "I just want peace in the family," she said at one point, her eyes wide and innocent, like a child's. "There's enough tension in the world." Tension? My jaw ached from holding it tight, a silent scream building within me. I chewed through my salad like it was cardboard, nodding through their endless parade of niceties. They had rehearsed this entire evening, a dinner where the unspoken story was that I was difficult, dramatic, and she was the innocent victim of my coldness. The waiter refilled my water glass, then turned to Olivia. "Same thing as last time, ma'am?" she beamed. "Yes, please," Olivia replied, her voice saccharine sweet. "I'm craving it again." Last time, she had been here with them, with Leo, to celebrate, while I sat alone, wondering if anyone in my family saw me as more than a placeholder. The check arrived. My dad, ever the patriarch, paid. My mom dabbed her mouth with a napkin and declared we should do this more often. Olivia gave me a little wave outside, as if we were casual acquaintances who had just run into each other at the grocery store. I didn't even say goodbye. I just walked. My car was a few blocks down, and I desperately needed air anyway. But then I heard my name. "Isabella." I turned. It was Mariana, my distant cousin, a free spirit who rarely attended these family gatherings. She looked flushed and slightly buzzed, standing under a street lamp with a to-go box in one hand and a glittery clutch in the other. "You were at dinner?" I asked, surprised to see her. She laughed a little too loud. No, I was at the dinner. The other one last week." I stared at her, my mind reeling. She hiccuped, her eyes widening as if she'd just realized her blunder. "Didn't they tell you?" "Oh no, I guess they didn't." Wow. "What dinner, Mariana?" My voice was barely a whisper. She shifted on her heels, suddenly sober, the weight of her words settling in. "Olivia made everyone promise not to tell you. She said you'd make it about yourself, that you were, unstable." My stomach churned. Since the breakup and all, she told us it was best for their peace. "Their peace?" I repeated, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "Your mom agreed," Mariana said softly, her gaze dropping to her feet. "She said it would just stir up more drama if you knew too soon." I stepped back as if she'd slapped me. The noise of the city dimmed, the world outside fading into a muffled hum. For a moment, all I could hear was the frantic rush of blood in my ears. She told them I was unstable. Mariana winced. "She said you hadn't been yourself, that you were spiraling. I shook my head, a slow, disbelieving shake. This wasn't just betrayal anymore. This was calculated strategy. Olivia hadn't just taken my fiancé. She'd rewritten the entire narrative so thoroughly, so cleanly, that I was now the danger, the jealous wreck, the irrational one who couldn't be trusted with the truth. I muttered something about needing to go, then turned and walked fast to my car, my mind a whirlwind of hurt and disbelief. My fingers trembled on the ignition. The engine hummed to life, but I didn't drive. I sat there, eyes locked on the streetlights, blinking back a flood that wasn't just tears. It was humiliation, isolation, fury. Back home, I dropped my keys on the counter and opened the drawer where I kept every useless document my parents ever pushed in front of me. Old insurance policies, property tax statements, faded receipts for things I barely remembered. And there it was, the estate planning form. My father had given it to me months ago, told me it was just to streamline things in case anything happened. I hadn't thought twice. I signed it, didn't even ask. Now, staring at the date and my signature, my stomach turned. Olivia's words echoed in my head. We're all doing what's best for the next generation. What if this wasn't just betrayal of the heart? What if it was betrayal on paper? That night, I opened a folder I hadn't touched in 6 months. What I found inside changed everything. It was nearly midnight when I finally set the folder down, on my kitchen table. I didn't need coffee. My racing pulse was doing more than enough to keep me awake. The folder had collected dust in the back of the drawer like an afterthought. One of those things you keep because you instinctively know it matters, but you don't yet understand why. I flipped it open slowly, already half dreading what I would find. The paper on top was crisp despite its age. My name was there in bold, Isabella Ramirez. Next to it, in smaller, precise script, Amendment to Family Trust. My father's signature was exactly where it always was, precise, consistent. My own, slanted, rushed, almost illegible. I remembered signing it. I had just ended things, or rather, Leo had just ended things, with me. His face a mask of regret as he confessed his feelings for Olivia. My hands were shaking from crying, and my dad had come by with a sympathetic look and said, "This will just help avoid taxes later. Nothing big." I wanted to be helpful. I wanted to show I wasn't the difficult daughter, the emotional burden. So, I signed. Back then, I didn't even read it. Not really. But now my eyes were locked onto a section halfway down the second page. In the event that the primary beneficiary, Isabella Ramirez, declines active claim to her inheritance or demonstrates inability to maintain it due to personal hardship, assets will transfer to secondary beneficiary Olivia Marin. The room seemed to tilt. I didn't decline anything. I never opted out. But that phrasing demonstrates inability. It was vague enough to mean whatever they wanted. Mental health, instability, heartbreak. Olivia had already planted those seeds. The date on the amendment was only days after that fateful restaurant dinner, the one where my world fell apart and she announced her engagement. And then my eyes dropped to the bottom of the page. Witness, Olivia Marin. Of course. My chest tightened, a vice grip tightening around my ribs. I picked up the paper and stared harder, as if squinting would somehow change what I was seeing. But it was all there, legal, cold, neatly worded to make it seem like I'd willingly handed her everything. There was even a faint coffee ring in the top left corner. I remembered that day. I'd spilled my tea while trying to keep from sobbing. Dad had smiled gently and said, "Take your time. I know things are tough right now." I remembered whispering, "I'm just trying to keep the peace." And I had, at my own devastating expense. I couldn't stay in that apartment one more minute. I needed answers. More than that, I needed perspective. I grabbed the folder, keys in hand, and headed to my car. My godmother Clara lived 15 minutes away. She was one of the few people in our extended family I still trusted implicitly. She'd helped manage estate planning for years before retiring. If anyone could tell me whether this was standard legal practice or something sinister, it was her. Her porch light was still on when I pulled up. I hadn't even called. I just drove there on instinct. She opened the door in a worn robe, her silver hair in a loose bun. "Isabella?" She blinked, her eyes adjusting to the late hour. "It's late, honey." "I know. I need you to look at something." She didn't ask questions. She just stepped aside and motioned for me to come in, her face etched with concern. We sat at her dining table, a tin of shortbread cookies between us, a silent offering of comfort. I slid the papers toward her. She put on her reading glasses, took a slow sip from a floral mug, and began reading. 2 pages in, she stopped, her brow furrowed. "Where did you get this version?" "My dad gave it to me," I said, my voice hoarse. "Said it was just to streamline the estate." She ran her finger along the margins. "This clause wasn't in the original trust. I drafted that version myself. It was clean. No alternate beneficiaries." She turned to the back page, her brow furrowed even deeper. "Olivia witnessed this?" I nodded, the action feeling like a concession. Clara looked up at me, her eyes sharper now, piercing through my weariness. "Now, Isabella, this isn't just a bad clause. This was done deliberately. You were emotionally vulnerable, and someone handed you legal bait while your guard was down." I sat back, breath caught in my throat. "Your father's lawyer filed this?" she asked. "I think so." She stood up and walked to a built-in cabinet. After a few minutes of rummaging, she returned with a framed photo. I recognized it instantly. Me, maybe 11 years old, beaming, holding a giant binder labeled Ramirez Family Property Plan. My father's arm was around my shoulder, a proud smile on his face. "He used to tell everyone you'd take over the property someday," she said, her voice soft, almost a whisper. "Said you had the brains and the heart for it." I couldn't speak. I just stared at the photo, at the little girl in that picture who didn't know that loyalty wouldn't protect her, that trust could be signed away in ink and assumed goodwill. Clara placed a gentle, reassuring hand over mine. "Whatever's happening here, it's not over, but you're going to need more than just memory to fight it. Get the original and get a lawyer who doesn't work for your father." I drove home slowly. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat in my car outside my apartment, clutching the folder like it might burst into flames. Part of me wished it would, that it could all burn, disappear, take the shame and anger with it. Instead, I pulled out my phone and typed a message to my father. "Did you know I gave up the trust to Olivia? Or was I just the signature you needed to make it all work?" I hit send. The screen stared back at me. Nothing. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Then a notification blinked. It wasn't a reply from him. It was a post from Olivia. A new photo. Her baby bump, prominent and perfectly framed, captioned, "Next chapter, family first." I didn't reply. I drove straight to the lawyer's office that handled the amendment. What I learned in that room made my hands shake. It was still dark, the kind of in-between hour where the city holds its breath, when I pulled up outside the red brick building downtown. Granger and Associates had been there for as long as I could remember, tucked between a shuttered bookstore and a dry cleaner that hadn't changed its faded sign since 1992. The fluorescent lights inside were already humming, casting a sterile glow, and Mr. Granger's familiar old Volvo was parked in the back, right where it always was. I sat in my car for a moment, hands gripping the steering wheel, steadying my breath. This wasn't a confrontation I wanted, but I was done avoiding them. My heart hammered against my ribs, a nervous drumbeat echoing in the quiet of the car. I pressed my palms against my temples, willing the headache that had been brewing since last night to recede. Every fiber of my being screamed for me to turn around, to go home and crawl under my duvet. But the image of Olivia's smug smile, her hand resting on a belly that represented my lost future, spurred me on. I had spent too long being the accommodating one, the quiet one, the one who kept the peace at her own expense. Not anymore. This was my moment to reclaim what was mine, not just the inheritance, but my narrative, my dignity. When I pushed open the heavy oak door, the little bell above it chimed, a small, tinny sound that had haunted my childhood. That same bell had rung every time my parents dragged me in here as a kid, usually to sign some innocuous-looking document, smile politely, and stay quiet while the adults talked in hushed, important tones. This time, however, I wasn't a child. I was an adult, armed with a newfound resolve and a growing understanding of the tangled web of deceit that had been spun around me. Mr. Granger looked up from his desk, surprised, his eyes widening slightly, behind thick lenses. He was older than I remembered, his hair more white than gray now, and his glasses slightly askew. But he still had the same deep, resonant voice and a slow, deliberate way of talking, as if every word he uttered was being carefully weighed for its precise meaning. "Isabella," he said, standing up, his voice a low rumble. "This is unexpected. Is everything all right?" He gestured to the empty chair across from his imposing mahogany desk, his expression a mixture of surprise and genuine concern. "I won't take much of your time, Mr. Granger," I said, stepping further into the room, my voice steadier than I expected. "I just have one question." I placed the document on his desk, the one Clara had confirmed had been meticulously altered. His eyes flickered down to the paper, and I saw something shift in his expression, a flicker of recognition, a brief moment of hesitation, like a man caught in a lie. "I've already spoken to someone who reviewed the original version," I added, my voice hardening slightly, leaving no room for doubt. "This isn't the one you drafted, is it?" He didn't sit. He just looked at me, then back at the incriminating paper, then back at me again. The pause that followed felt like it lasted an entire week, stretching out, heavy with unspoken truths. Finally, he sighed, a deep, weary sound that seemed to carry the weight of years. "No," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "No, it's not." The air seemed to compress in that small, silent room, growing thick with unspoken accusations. I felt my fingers curl into my palms, a silent battle raging within me to maintain my composure. "Olivia came to me months before the change," he continued slowly, his gaze fixed on some point beyond my shoulder. "She was persistent, very persuasive, said it was time for the family assets to be realigned, that your life had shifted and she was in a better position to secure things for the next generation, for the baby." He paused, as if weighing his next words. "She said you'd abdicated interest." "I abdicated interest?" I repeated, my voice tightening, a tremor I couldn't quite control. He nodded, a slow, deliberate movement. "That's the word she wanted in there. Abdication of interest. It's vague enough to hold up in probate court, to be interpreted in various ways." My blood ran cold. "And my father?" I asked, a bitter taste filling my mouth. He wasn't sure at first, was he? But he signed off when she told him I was emotionally unstable, that I'd had trouble. Mr. Granger didn't deny it. He simply averted his gaze, a subtle confirmation. "She told him I was unfit," I said flatly, the words hanging heavy in the air. He remained silent. "But you let them do this," I said, barely keeping the tremor from completely taking over my voice. "You let them take everything." His mouth twitched, a nervous tick. "That's not exactly true." He walked slowly to a cabinet behind his desk, unlocked it with a quiet click, and retrieved a thick file from the bottom drawer, the kind that was yellowed at the edges with notes scribbled in faded blue ink along the tabs. He set it on the table with a soft thud. "This," he said, pulling a single, crisp document free from the file, "was the original version your father signed before Olivia got involved. It named you as the primary heir, explicitly. The trust, the land, even the family account. It was clear, straightforward, and filed under your name." He slid it across the polished surface of the desk toward me. My eyes scanned the familiar words, my name appearing again and again, like a long-lost friend. "But it was never filed," I whispered, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. "No," he confirmed. "Olivia came in 2 weeks later, after your father signed this. She said she had new documentation, new plans. She brought in that clause, the abdication clause, and insisted your father make the change. I asked if he was sure. He said he was tired, that it wasn't worth the fight." My stomach turned, a sickening lurch. "She wore him down," I said, the words a raw whisper. Mr. Granger nodded once, a grim acknowledgement. "That's one way to put it." I flipped through the pages of the original trust. The ink was there, my name, my father's unmistakable signature. But it had been shoved aside, hidden away, for something cleaner, colder. A version meticulously crafted to erase me entirely. Olivia's version had no space for me in it at all. I looked up at him, my voice steady now, infused with a new kind of calm born of understanding. "Why do you still have this?" He hesitated for a beat before saying, his voice softer, almost confidential. "Because I don't destroy originals unless I'm explicitly ordered to, and I never was ordered to destroy this one." He tapped the original document gently. "Do they know you kept it?" I asked. "No," he said, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching the corners of his lips. "They think it's gone, that I shredded everything and backed up the new version." I leaned back in the chair, taking it all in, a chilling understanding dawning on me. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a misunderstanding, a clumsy oversight. This was a campaign, a slow, deliberate, and systematic removal. "Do I have a case?" I asked, my voice now entirely steady, devoid of any tremor. "If I fight this?" Mr. Granger removed his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose thoughtfully. "With the right lawyer and the right witness," he met my eyes, his gaze unwavering. "Yes, but it won't be easy. They've covered their tracks in every way that matters, except this." He tapped the file between us. "I never thought I'd need it," he added, his voice tinged with a hint of melancholy. "But I always believed you were the one who'd carry it forward, Isabella, not her." I didn't know what to say to that. I just stared at the file like it might open a door I'd already been locked out of, a door to a future that had been stolen from me. "Can I have a copy?" I asked, finally breaking the silence. "I'll make you two," he replied, already pushing himself up from his desk. He stepped out of the room, and for a moment, I sat in the profound silence. Everything inside me was shifting, not breaking, but realigning. The raw, searing anger had given way to a sharp, precise focus. The ache was still there, a dull throb beneath the surface, but it was now sharp, useful, a constant reminder of what had been taken. When he returned, he handed me 2 thick folders. I took them, tucked them carefully into my bag, and stood. "Thank you," I said, my voice strong, no longer shaking. Mr. Granger gave a small nod, a quiet warning in his eyes. "You be careful, Isabella. She's not going to sit still." I met his eyes, a flicker of something new, something resolute, in my own. Neither am I. I walked out into the crisp morning light. The street was quiet, the town just starting to stir, the first hints of activity rippling through the city. But I wasn't the same woman who had walked into that office 20 minutes earlier. I wasn't walking out of that office. I was stepping into a new version of myself, shedding the old skin of resignation and passivity. And the first person I planned to test this new version of myself on was Olivia. I didn't drive home right away. Instead, I took the long way, winding, through the outer edges of the city, where the neighborhoods began to widen and the trees grew taller, stretching towards the awakening sky. The streets grew quieter as I approached the old estate my grandfather once called our legacy. Olivia, with her grandiose plans, had often referred to it as an event space. I hadn't been there in years, not since Dad had quietly added Olivia to the maintenance account and stopped updating me altogether on the property's affairs. I'd almost forgotten I still had my name on the deed, an oversight he must have assumed I'd never check, never question. But as I turned the corner, onto Bridge Hollow Drive and saw the valet attendants in black slacks and white gloves, my stomach dropped. Every square foot of the circular driveway was packed. Mercedes, Teslas, even a Rolls-Royce shimmered in the morning sun. And then I saw it. A pastel banner, adorned with shimmering ribbons, arched above the grand entrance, fluttering gently in the breeze. "Welcome, baby Luna." The first of the new line. I slammed on the brake, the sudden stop jolting me forward. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than I realized, my knuckles white. I could hear laughter from the sprawling gardens, even through the closed windows of my car. A string quartet was playing a light, airy tune. Champagne glasses clinked, in joyous celebration, and someone shouted, "She's glowing, Olivia, absolutely radiant." I pulled to the side of the street and parked under a large oak tree, far enough to stay invisible, but close enough to see the elaborate, uninvited celebration unfolding. The irony was a bitter taste in my mouth. They'd thrown a lavish, regal baby shower on property that I legally co-owned, property that represented my family's history, my grandfather's dreams, and my rightful inheritance. I sat frozen, a silent observer to a spectacle that mocked my very existence. A catering truck backed up to the ornate iron gate, its tires crunching on the gravel. One of the staff peeled off a delivery sheet and stuck it against the window of the truck. The bold black letters hit me like a physical slap. "Invoice paid. By I. Ramirez." It took a few seconds before I could even process it. They were using my account, my signature, my co-ownership of the estate, and they didn't invite me. They didn't even acknowledge me. No, that wasn't true. They acknowledged me the same way you acknowledge a doormat. You wipe your feet and keep walking. I looked down at my phone and opened Instagram. Sure enough, there it was. Olivia's latest post, a picture of her and our parents standing under the festive banner. My father had his hand on her swollen belly, a protective, proud gesture. My mother was smiling like she'd just won the lottery, her face radiating pure joy. The caption read, "Today reminded me what real family feels like. Grateful. Legacy. Lineage. Next chapter." Not a single word about me. Not a single tag. Just like that, I'd been completely erased from the family narrative, relegated to a phantom, a forgotten memory. But as I sat there, something strange happened. I didn't cry. Not even a lump formed in my throat. Instead, I reached into the glove compartment, pulled out the folder Mr. Granger had handed me, and laid it open on the passenger seat. I flipped past the trust summary, past the dry legal jargon, and found the section on real estate assets. There it was, clear as day. Bridge Hollow Estate, listed under the Ramirez Family Trust, and beneath that, in neat, unambiguous type, co-owners of record, Isabella Ramirez, 51%, Olivia Marin, 49%. That 2% difference wasn't just a legal detail. It was leverage. It was the key to unlocking the cage I had unknowingly been trapped in. I rolled the window up, turned the key in the ignition, and drove away without looking back, a quiet storm brewing within me. Back home, I changed out of my formal blouse, slipping into a comfortable hoodie, and made a cup of chamomile tea. Not because I needed comfort, but because I needed routine. a familiar anchor in the swirling chaos of my emotions. It grounded me, brought me back to myself. I sat at my kitchen table, the documents from Mr. Granger spread out like puzzle pieces, each one a vital clue in the elaborate deception. I highlighted, circled, bookmarked, cross-referenced. This wasn't about revenge anymore, not truly. This was about correction. Correction for every time I let it slide, every moment I'd bitten my tongue, every whispered, "Let's just keep the peace." By midnight, I had everything I needed, meticulously organized, each piece of evidence a silent testament to the truth. The next morning, Mr. Granger met me at his office again. This time, I didn't ask questions. I gave him instructions. We filed a motion to temporarily freeze the trust's distributions pending review of the legitimacy of the last amendment. We filed a property use injunction, effective immediately, preventing Olivia from hosting further events on any jointly owned property, and we mailed Olivia a formal cease and desist letter, certified and tracked. She had 14 days to respond, or the next envelope she'd receive would be from the court itself. That night, I lit a candle and sat by the window, watching the soft glow flicker in the darkness. The wind outside was gentle, the kind that makes you think something's shifting in the air, and maybe it was. I'd spent my whole life being the one who didn't cause trouble, the one who avoided confrontation. But silence can be a kind of power, too, especially when it finally breaks. She thought I'd stay the silent cousin. But the papers she'll open tomorrow. That's me finally writing my name back into the story. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The letter came the next morning, not from a courthouse or a lawyer, but a message pinged straight to my phone. Short, sweet, chilling. Family meeting tonight, 6:30. Dad would have wanted us to fix this privately. Signed, of course, Olivia. No call, no context, just a directive dressed up like diplomacy. I sat at the kitchen table, a mug of black coffee going cold in my hand, staring at that text. Part of me wanted to delete it and move on, to sever ties completely and escape the toxic drama. But another part, the part that had slept on the floor of the family lake house every summer while Olivia got the good bed, the part that remembered every small injustice, told me to go. I needed to see exactly what kind of performance she had choreographed this time, what new depths of manipulation she would plumb. I wanted to see her face when she realized her carefully constructed facade was crumbling. At 6:20 p.m., I pulled into the sprawling driveway of the main house, the one Dad used to call neutral ground. This was the house where we held countless birthdays, boisterous Thanksgivings, even the solemn wake for Aunt Lynn. But now, it looked like it had been gutted and rebranded, stripped of its comforting familiarity. When I stepped inside, the sense of alienation only deepened. The study, the very room where my father had once sketched out his will on the back of a napkin with me sitting beside him, had been completely redecorated. Olivia's maternity photos hung in gold frames, a glaring display of her new dominion. "Luna, coming soon," was stenciled onto the wall in faux cursive vinyl, an arrogant announcement of her perceived victory. His worn leather chair was gone, replaced with an ivory accent piece that screamed nursery chic more than family legacy. Every seat in the room was taken. My mother sat stiffly at the far end of the room, her lips pursed tight, her gaze darting nervously around the room. Two cousins, who hadn't returned my texts in months, gave me awkward, almost apologetic nods, avoiding my gaze. My Uncle Troy didn't even pretend to make eye contact, staring intently at his shoes. And there she was, Olivia, standing at the front, beside a pristine whiteboard that read, in bold pink marker, Estate Harmony Plan. She smiled, a radiant, almost blinding smile, as if I had just walked into her bridal shower, not a tense family confrontation. "Isabella," she cooed, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "You made it. Good. We can get started." I didn't sit. I stayed near the doorway, arms folded across my chest, my posture signaling my unwavering resolve. "Started with what? Olivia?" Olivia cleared her throat, a theatrical gesture like a newscaster ready for broadcast. "We've all seen how messy things have gotten. Misunderstandings, legal threats, and frankly, it's hurting the family." She glanced around the room, her eyes searching for nods of support, and a few of my sheepish relatives obliged, their heads bobbing slightly. "Dad was under a lot of stress the last few months," she continued, her voice softening, feigning sympathy. "He was grieving, tired, and well, not thinking clearly." My stomach churned with disgust. He was grieving, but not thinking clearly? This was her carefully constructed narrative, a flimsy excuse for blatant deception. "And so," she said, holding up a folder like a prop in a courtroom drama, her voice gaining a false gravitas, "we believe there's strong reason to question whether certain signatures and agreements were made under undue influence. That includes the property deed you're clinging to." "Undue influence," I echoed silently, the phrase tasting like ash in my mouth. "Is that your new favorite phrase, Olivia?" I asked, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. She didn't flinch, her composure, unnervingly solid. "We're just saying the timing was odd. And now that you're freezing the trust's distributions, it's destabilizing everything for all of us." "All of us?" I repeated, my voice rising slightly, unable to contain my scorn. "You mean you, Olivia. This is about you." "No," Olivia replied, her voice syrupy with fake sincerity. "I mean the baby. Luna deserves to be born into a family, not a war zone." She had the nerve to touch her stomach, a dramatic gesture, as if she were the Virgin Mary in a holiday pageant, sacrificing herself for the sanctity of her unborn child. "This isn't about money, Isabella," she added, her eyes wide with a practiced innocence. "It's about healing." That was the precise moment I realized this wasn't a meeting. It was an ambush, a carefully orchestrated performance designed to make me feel like the outsider, to second-guess myself, to break me and force me to fold. They wanted me to capitulate, to silently surrender to her fabricated reality. But I had come prepared for this kind of theatricality. I reached into my tote bag, pulled out a sleek navy folder, and walked deliberately, calmly, up to the table. I opened it without a word and slid a set of papers across to Olivia. "What's this?" she asked, her voice faltering slightly, her composure finally cracking. "Notarized medical reports from Dad's last 6 months," I said, my voice clear and steady. "Signed by his attending physician, showing no cognitive decline." I turned to the rest of them, my gaze sweeping across their faces, lingering on each. 1. Emails between me and Dad about the estate, date-stamped, screenshots, and the signed original draft of the trust before it was altered. My mother stirred uncomfortably in her seat, her lips parted in a silent gasp. Olivia's eyes widened, her practiced smile finally vanishing, replaced by a look of sheer panic. You're bluffing?" she stammered, her voice thin and reedy. "No," I said softly, a chilling calm in my voice. "I just finally stopped pretending I didn't see the truth." She stared at the folder as if it might burn her, as if the truth contained within its pages was a physical flame. I looked at them all. The cousins who once came to me for job references, the uncles who toasted me at my promotion, even my mother, who used to tell me I was the calm one, the sensible one. Their faces were a mixture of shock, confusion, and dawning realization. "Look through it or don't," I said, my voice unwavering, betraying no hint of the fury simmering beneath the surface. "But the court will." I turned without waiting for their reply, and in that silence, the one they used to count as my weakness, the one they thought signaled my defeat. I left them stewing in their own doubts, because now that silence held weight, a profound, undeniable power, and they knew it. By the time I got home, the cool evening air outside was a stark contrast to the burning indignation still simmering within me. I'd thought the meeting would be the height of their performance, that maybe, just maybe, I'd earned a moment of quiet after laying down the truth. Instead, I woke up to noise. Dozens of notifications lit up my phone. Missed calls, frantic, messages, emails flagged urgent, all flashing like warning lights on a dashboard. It took me a second to realize what I was looking at. A link was being passed around, a public post titled, "The Truth About Isabella," written by Concerned Family. I clicked it, and my breath caught in my throat. Photos I hadn't seen in years flashed across the screen. A blurry one of me leaving a therapist's office, another of me crying in a parking lot after a painful breakup. Screenshots of emails were ripped out of context, manipulated to paint a damning picture. All of it was strung together under bold headings like unstable, estranged, and greedy. There were quotes from supposed sources claiming I'd always resented Olivia's closeness with Dad, that I'd threatened legal action just to hurt the baby, that I'd cut ties with the family years ago. It wasn't just a hit piece. It was a deliberate, surgical dismantling of my reputation, a targeted character assassination. My inbox was flooded with emails from board members of the nonprofit where I served. One gently asked if I needed to step back for mental clarity. Another suggested I might want to publicly clarify recent developments. Even my Pilates instructor canceled our morning session until things settled down. And in all of it, Olivia's name wasn't once mentioned, just a shadow campaign, signed vaguely by love and launched with chilling precision. I sat at the kitchen table in stunned silence. No tears, just the kind of profound stillness that comes after something important breaks inside you. They called me unstable for not handing over what was rightfully mine, for daring to fight back. Around mid-morning, after I finished a call, with my lawyer about defamation statutes, I opened my laptop to back up the estate documents to the cloud. As I scrolled through old files, a folder titled "To Isabella" caught my eye. It was dated 2 weeks before Dad died. I clicked it, my heart pounding. Inside, there was only one file, an audio recording. I pressed play, and my father's voice, rough and breathy, but unmistakably clear, filled the quiet room. "Isabella, if anything ever happens, listen to me. Don't trust anyone without a signature. Olivia, she's clever, but she plays dirtier than you think. I left the papers with Granger. If she changes them, fight. You've earned what I tried to protect, and I'm proud of you, kid." The audio ended. I just stared at the screen, tears finally blurring my vision. A beat passed, then another, and then I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding for over a year. There it was, the missing piece, the confirmation I desperately needed. He knew. Not just about the manipulation, but about her, about Olivia's true nature. And he hadn't doubted me. Not for a second. I didn't cry, not in the way I expected. I didn't scream. Instead, I saved the voicemail, attached it to an email, and sent it directly to my attorney with the subject line, "Supplemental Evidence, Defamation and Estate Challenge." Then, I opened a blank note on my desktop and began drafting a meticulous timeline of every false accusation, every date, every name involved. This wasn't just a family feud anymore. It was a case, a legal battle for justice, and I was done being the silent one. Olivia's public relations stunt had just become a massive legal liability for her and a powerful asset for me. It was the moment I stopped reacting and started strategically planning my next move. The next time they mentioned my name online, it would be in a court summons. The courthouse stood gray and still against the morning sky, like a giant that had seen too much. I parked down the block, adjusted the collar of my coat, and walked toward the front entrance without looking back. No cameras were waiting for me, but I knew Olivia would make an entrance. She arrived 5 minutes later in a pristine cream suit, flanked by her lawyer and some overly attentive guy holding a giant umbrella, despite there not being a single cloud in the sky. She smiled like it was a fashion launch, not a legal reckoning, her eyes scanning for any hint of a camera. I didn't say a word as we passed each other through the security checkpoint, just kept walking, my gaze fixed forward. The courtroom itself was colder than I remembered, the air thick with anticipation. My lawyer, Glenn, was already there. He was calm, his briefcase resting locked at his feet like a promise. I took my seat beside him, my legs steady, my hands folded calmly in my lap. Olivia didn't look my way once, her gaze fixed on the judge's bench. The bailiff called the court into session, and when the judge entered, every cell in my body felt like it stood at attention, ready for battle. "This session pertains to the matter of Marin versus Ramirez," the clerk read, his voice devoid of emotion. Then came the twist no one expected. "And the countersuit filed under Ramirez versus Marin alleging defamation, fraud, and unlawful surveillance." Olivia shifted abruptly in her seat, a ripple of unease passing through her perfectly composed facade. Her lawyer's expression twitched, a barely perceptible flicker of surprise, and in that brief second, before anyone could react, I felt something quiet surge through me. Not revenge, just a profound sense of balance. The judge turned to Olivia's side first. "Counselor," he began, his voice authoritative, "I understand your client initiated this proceeding. However, given the countersuit, we'll be reviewing both simultaneously. Any objections?" Olivia's attorney cleared his throat, a nervous gesture. "Your Honor, we respectfully request a recess to reassess the new materials." The judge raised an eyebrow, a clear sign of his impatience. "You've had 3 days, Counselor. Motion denied. Proceed." What came next was a blur of legal back and forth, timelines, screenshots, character affidavits. But nothing cut through the noise quite like what happened in R2. In an attempt to defend Olivia's control of the family narrative, her lawyer introduced a new batch of documents. "This thread," he said confidently, projecting the emails onto the large screen for everyone to see, "demonstrates Miss Marin's reasonable concern for the estate's security and her sister's well-being." He didn't get to finish his rehearsed explanation, because right there on the second page of the projected emails was one Olivia had sent 3 months ago. Subject line, "Security access urgent." She'd forwarded detailed instructions to a private IT technician, asking how to remotely mirror my home security system without setting off any alerts. Her IP address, her own words, her timestamp, it was all there, undeniable. The judge leaned forward, his expression stern. "Miss Marin," he addressed her directly, his voice cutting through the suddenly silent courtroom. "Did you or did you not access your sister's private residence feed without her consent?" Olivia didn't answer, her face paling. Her lawyer tried to object, stammering that it was out of context, an overreach, a misunderstanding, but it was too late. The silence that followed was heavier than any argument, thicker than any lie. I didn't flinch, didn't smirk, didn't even look at Olivia. I kept my eyes on the judge, my focus unwavering. Glenn rose, his hands clasped behind his back like he was taking a leisurely stroll. "Your Honor," he stated calmly, his voice resonating with quiet power. "We're prepared to settle this in full today, or take it federal. We have corroborating data and multiple legal avenues prepared for Miss Marin's extensive pattern of fraud, defamation, and invasion of privacy." The judge exhaled slowly, then nodded, a decisive movement. "Given the evidence submitted and the nature of the breach," he began, his voice firm and final, "I'm ordering immediate penalties to be enforced against Miss Marin. All assets contested under the trust will be frozen pending further review. Furthermore, the The court finds the defamation campaign to be premeditated and malicious in nature. He paused, his gaze fixed on Olivia. Ms. Marin, you will refrain from any further public statements, direct or indirect, regarding Ms. Ramirez. Violation of this order will result in contempt of court. Olivia's shoulders sagged, not from exhaustion, but from complete and utter exposure. The gavel dropped with a sharp crack. People began to stir, the hushed whispers of reporters in, the back growing louder as they scribbled furiously. Glenn leaned toward me, whispering, "It's done for now." But it wasn't just about the ruling. It was about what didn't need to be said anymore, the undeniable truth that had finally been laid bare. As I gathered my things and stood, Olivia finally turned to look at me just once. I didn't blink, didn't offer a hint of emotion. She turned back as the bailiff opened the side door, one last glance in my direction, like she was desperately trying to read something on my face. Maybe regret, maybe mercy. I gave her nothing. I walked out of that courthouse alone. No cameras, no reporters, just me and my attorneys. Glenn's quiet words echoed in my ears. "It's over, Isabella, and this time, it's over on your terms." The headlines came quickly, spreading like wildfire through the local online community and beyond. Local influencer loses brand deals after. Court ruling. Marian family inheritance dispute ends in legal defeat. Olivia's sponsors dropped her like a hot potato within 48 hours of the verdict. Her carefully curated Instagram went dark. The perfectly lit selfies and aspirational lifestyle shots vanishing into the digital ether. And the apology she posted, clearly drafted by a nervous lawyer, felt as hollow as the smile she wore when she first walked into court. "I apologize to my sister Isabella for any misunderstandings that may have occurred during this difficult time," it read, devoid of genuine remorse. Not a single, "I lied." Not one, "I'm sorry." I didn't respond. Not online, not in texts, not to her lawyer's frantic suggestion of a private meeting to discuss a reconciliation. Some wars don't need noise to end. Some victories are felt best in the profound, liberating silence that follows the storm. 2. Weeks later, I moved back into the house. My house. There were no cameras, no press camped outside, just a profound sense of peace. The air inside smelled like cedar and lemon, a familiar, comforting scent that felt like coming home. It was the first breath I'd taken in months that didn't feel borrowed, the first truly unburdened inhale. I spent my first evening unpacking things I hadn't touched since before Olivia's lavish baby shower, things that had been hastily packed away as I fled the wreckage of my life. Not just physical boxes, but memories, feelings, old versions of myself I didn't even recognize anymore. The kitchen hadn't changed much, same off-white cabinets, same humming fridge. But somehow, the whole place felt different, infused with a new energy, a fresh start. There was a window above the sink I used to avoid, a place where I'd once cried countless tears, staring into the backyard, like I was waiting for someone to come rescue me from a nightmare. Now I stood there, holding the deed to the house in my hand, my name, my signature. No tricks, no clauses, no hidden manipulations. And out beyond the glass, the late afternoon sun spilled across the grass, stretching long shadows toward the same wooden fence I once leaned against. Heartbroken, after Leo left with Olivia's hand in his. I didn't feel bitter anymore. I didn't feel a wild, triumphant joy either. I felt whole. I felt complete. A soft ping broke my quiet moment. I walked over to my phone, curiosity piqued, and checked the notification. It was a message from my father's old number. There was no text, just an image, a scanned photo from the 90s, our family Thanksgiving. Everyone smiling, gathered around a large table laden with food. Except my face was torn from it. Right where I used to sit, there was an awkward, jagged gap, like someone had tried to erase me, to make me disappear, without noticing how obvious and painful the deletion looked. I didn't flinch, didn't save it, didn't even reply. Instead, I placed the phone face down on the counter and picked up a small wooden plaque I'd had custom made a few days before. It wasn't flashy, just 4 words carved into warm oak. You don't have to be forgiven to be free. I hung it on the kitchen wall beside the window, a quiet affirmation of my newfound liberation. I stood there for a long time, arms crossed, letting the stillness settle around me, letting the truth of those words sink deep into my soul. That window used to feel like a wound, always watching, always exposing my vulnerability. Now, it felt like a frame, a portal to a future I had the power to open or close, to shape as I saw fit. It's funny what changes when you stop chasing closure from people who never offered honesty to begin with. Later that night, I brewed a cup of tea and sat on the back steps, watching the dusk roll in, painting the sky with hues of purple and orange. There were no calls, no apologies, no manufactured drama, just the quiet creak of the wind through the trees, a soothing symphony of nature. I thought about the girl I used to be, the Isabella before the betrayal, before the courtroom, before the shattered dreams. She thought she had to keep peace at all costs, to bend and break herself to accommodate others. Now I know peace isn't silence. It's truth. And sometimes truth means walking away from the people you once begged to love you, the ones who chose to betray you instead. You don't need their photo on the wall. You don't need their seat at the table. You just need to know this life, this moment, this self, it's unequivocally, beautifully, irrevocably yours. And that window, that view of my own peaceful backyard, it was always mine, just waiting for me to reclaim it. Have you ever let go of someone you once begged to understand you? Drop your story in the comments. Someone out there might need to hear it.